85 years old and still actively serving God. You know, maybe we need to rethink perhaps, this myth of the American retirement syndrome. It is a myth, because the American retirement syndrome kind of goes like this. I work really hard for X number of years, and then when I retire from my job, now I get to do whatever I want for myself. That's the American retirement mentality. It shifts from I work, now I'm going to do whatever I want for myself, and I become the focal point of my life. Let me ask you a question. Name one person blessed by God in the Bible that retired. See, I'm not opposed to retirement. I get it. I'm not opposed to retirement. I'm opposed to the idea that once I retire, all I'm going to do is serve myself now in my retirement. I'm opposed to that. Caleb would be opposed to that. We can go into a retirement perfectly fine, but it just frees us up for more opportunities to serve God in different ways. We don't have to go 8 hours to our job. Now I can serve God, but I don't live my life for myself. That's the myth of the American retirement. Ron Hutchcraft wrote, here's one of God's players who is near the end of his game, but he wants to light up the scoreboard. He says, give me that mountain. I'll take on those giants as if they're in the way of what God wants. That's the kind of fourth quarter players that God's looking for. Yes, your body may slow down. Your energy may not be what it once was. But you're not dead yet. God wouldn't be leaving you here if he still didn't have work for you to do, lives for you to touch, a difference for you to make. Maybe you have allowed yourself to slip into a survival mentality, or maybe you become self-absorbed or self-pitying. In the fourth quarter, some people just settle into a reward mindset. Well, I've worked hard all these years. I'll just settle back and relax now. It's time just to reward myself for what I did in the past and the 3 quarters of my life. Ron says, well, wait a minute. The game isn't over yet. We'll rest in heaven. We'll get rewarded in heaven. Or as Amy Carmichael said, we will have all eternity to celebrate our victories, but only a few short hours to win them. Caleb says, hey, I may be 85, but I'm just as strong today as I was then, and God, give me that mountain because you made a promise to me. I'm going up there, and with God's help, I'm going to take him out. See, retirement now frees up your time to do more things for God. Caleb realized that his strength was not in his self. His strength was there because God allowed him to be as strong. Did you see that? So his strength was in the Lord, and he knew that God would never fail him. He said, God has kept me strong all this time. He wasn't in himself. He was thinking about God. And then he says, it may be that he will allow me to conquer those people up there. That's not a thing of doubt. It may be is not doubt. It's a confident assurance. He's just basically saying, listen, I trust God. He's going to give me this. He made a promise to me. So in the end, Caleb's preserving faith won out over both the size of the enemies and also his friends that came back and gave the bad report. And Caleb's readiness to go against a formidable enemy is the kind of faith which should characterize all of Israel. And it's probably why the person who wrote the book of Joshua recorded this, so that all Israel could be encouraged in his action. All Israel should characterize this kind of faith. Caleb did not see the Anakim as a problem. He didn't see the giants as a problem. They were simply in the way to what God wanted to give him. Giant, who cares? Mountains, fortified cities, who cares? God's bigger than all of them. He'll take care of me. He did not let the difficulty of the task dissuade him from doing the right thing. It's hard, yes. I don't deny it, but God's with me. He'll take care of it. So Caleb confesses that it was the Lord who kept him alive these 45 years. God made a promise that must be fulfilled. 45 years, he's fought battles. He's had to deal with the negative talk of the Israelites in the wilderness. He's had to see God judge the people in the wilderness for their actions. He's seen all of this. Now time has come for him to receive his reward. 45 years he waited for this reward. Again, it comes back to Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6. And without faith, it is impossible to please him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. Caleb was a person like that. He believed God exists. He believed God rewards those who seek him. So God's now going to reward him for his actions. So now verses 13 through 15, we see the resolution and the result of this request. So look at verses 13 all the way down to the end of the chapter. Then Joshua blessed him, and he gave Hebron to Caleb the son of Jephunneh for an inheritance. Therefore Hebron became the inheritance of Caleb the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite to this day, because he wholly followed the Lord. Third time the text tells us that. He wholly followed the Lord, the God of Israel. Now the name of Hebron formerly was Kiriath Arba. Arba was the greatest man among the Anakim, and the land had rest from war, which is the second time in Joshua it says the land had rest from war. So now we see the reward. The promise made 45 years earlier now is coming into fruition. Caleb gets his reward. So this concept of blessing, blessed be you, Caleb, says Joshua. This concept of blessing has a rich heritage in the Old Testament. But it basically means when people blessed each other, it conveyed a desire for God's best to encounter them. For God's best to encounter them. So we would never say, may God bless you in murdering somebody. We would never say that because we want God's best for the person. We wouldn't say God bless you in murdering somebody because that's not the best. So we want the best when we bless a person is the idea. So now Hebron becomes Caleb's inheritance, his reward, this fulfillment of his promise to Caleb. God now gives Caleb this land. See, faith in the promises of God is not expressed in human passivity, but in action. If you believe something, you will act upon it. Whatever you believe in your mind, you will act out in your life. That's just the way it works. Beliefs drive behaviors. What you believe drives your behavior. And if you want to know what you believe, ask someone to look at your life and then give you an evaluation of what they see. Do they see Jesus? Do they see God? What do they see? What are the actions that you live? That's a good way to describe what we truly believe. So here's Caleb. Faith in God, truly believes and then acts on it. How do we know that we truly believe the promises of God? Is when we act on them. When God says something and then I act on it. When I really believe it. Here's a great example of no faith. Several years ago, we had a men's retreat, and it was in September, latest September. And before we left that week, we were told by the weather and by the news, it's going to snow on the weekend. It's September. I said, no, it's not going to snow in September. I do not believe what they're telling me. Now, how often do the weather people get it right? Okay, I'm thinking that they're wrong again. So I'm not believing them whatsoever. So I do not turn the heat on in my house. When I arrived back Saturday evening after being at the men's retreat, my house was freezing cold because guess what? It snowed. So what is the evidence that I did not believe the weatherman? I did not turn on the heat. What we believe is demonstrated by our actions. If I would have believed them, I would have turned on the heat, but I did not believe them. So if you want to know what you truly believe, look at your own actions. They will demonstrate what you truly believe to be true. James says this, what good is it then, my brothers, if someone says he has faith, but does not have works, does not put that faith in action? Can that faith save him? Now let me put another word in there to give you a context and an understanding of what this is saying. Can that kind of faith save him? It's not that faith saves. Faith does save, but can that kind of faith that believes, I can believe whatever I want, I just don't have to act on it, okay? Can that kind of faith save him? So also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. For as the body apart from the spirit is dead, so also faith apart from works is dead. So James tells us, no, be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving ourselves. So what we believe, we will put into action that demonstrates that we believe it. Caleb is now putting into action what he believed, that God would give him this land. He's going to give him this land. Caleb's wholehearted devotion to God had never been in question. And he received as a reward this inheritance. He believed the promises of God and acted upon them. He was rewarded for that. And actually, he was given this Hebron, this famous city. Abraham, the father of the nation of Israel, his wife Sarah died and was buried in Hebron. Genesis chapter 23. Famous city for the Israelites. And Sarah died at Kiriath Arbor, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. It becomes a very important city for the nation of Israel, where Sarah is buried at. He gets this city. The mountains, fortified cities, giants, the task will be difficult. Of course it will be difficult. But Caleb's confidence in conquering the land is based on this one thing. The Lord said. That's it. It wasn't his strength. It wasn't the strength of the army. One reason is, God said it. I believe it. That's it. Doesn't that sound simplistic? Maybe we should be a little simpler in our faith. God said it. I believe it. That's it. I believe it. So Caleb is a case study in unflinching faithfulness and seasoned courage. 45 years holding on to a promise that's now coming to pass. It's now coming to fruition. Caleb had a strong faith in the promises of God. They sustained him in his difficult times. And that's a great thing about the promises of God. They will sustain us in difficult times. When we're holding on to the promise of God, when everything seems so crazy around us and we can't figure out what's up and what's down, we hold on to the promises of God, and that will sustain us in this time. It gives us a foundation to stand on, that we're secure. That's what the promises of God do. They sustain us in difficult times. Think about this for a second. I thought about this. Caleb battled for at least 5 years in the promised land, maybe a little bit longer. Depends on when the 40 years began in the wilderness. He was 40 years old when he got the promise, 45 years later when it came to pass. He fought almost 5 years of battles. And guess what? In every battle he fought in, he knew he would not die. Think about it. In every battle he fought in, he knew he would not die. It doesn't mean he wouldn't have gotten injured. He may have gotten injured, but he knew that God made a promise to him and God would fulfill his promise. So every battle he fought in, he knew he would survive. Now, that doesn't mean you get arrogant and say, okay, well, I'm just going to run right in the midst of the people and let him. No, of course he fought well, but he knew he would survive every single battle. And whenever judgment fell on the people when they disobeyed God and didn't do what he asked them to do, he knew he would survive that as well. Why? Because God promised him. He made a promise to him. In fact, in Numbers chapter 14, and the Lord spoke to Moses and to Aaron, "How long shall this wicked congregation grumble against me? I have heard the grumblings of the people of Israel." So this is the chapter following the 12 spies being sent out, Numbers 13, "which they grumble against me. Say to them, as I live, declares the Lord, what you have said in my hearing I will do to you. Your dead bodies shall fall in the wilderness, and of all your number listed in the census from 20 years old and upward, who have grumbled against me, not one shall come into the land where I swore that I would make you dwell, except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, the son of Nun. Only 2 are allowed to come into this." He watched everyone 20 years and above at that time die in the wilderness. But he knew that he wouldn't die. Why do you know that? Because God promised him that you'll have an inheritance and I'm going to give you that land. He knew he wouldn't die in the wilderness. He wouldn't die in battle. He wouldn't die when the plagues came upon the people. Why? Because God made a promise to him and he believed it. Everyone 20 years old and up and older died. Caleb was faithful. And like Caleb, we must be faithful to God, not only at the start of our walk with him, but also at the end of our walk with him. We cannot allow ourselves to rest on our past accomplishments. We have to continue moving forward in faith. We can't rest on past accomplishments. We got to continue moving forward. Like Caleb, he realized he keeps moving forward in faith. He's going to come into that time where he receives his inheritance, that promise of God, but he's going to be faithful as he's doing it. If you are not moving forward let me put it this way. If we are not moving forward in our faith, we are moving backwards in our faith. And you say, how is that possible? If I'm not moving forward, I'm standing still. Well, that's part of the problem. God is always moving forward. So if you're standing still, the distance between you and God is always growing greater if you're not growing in your faith. See what I'm saying? So if we're not moving forward in our faith, we're actually moving back in our faith because God is always moving forward and we keep up with him. Caleb said, I'm going to go forward. And God honored his 45-year-old promise. And I guess you could say it like this. The promise is the reward, or the reward is the promise. What God said 45 years ago, he now fulfilled in Caleb's day by giving him that hill country. He kept his promise to Caleb.